What's going on, everyone? Good afternoon. So we had a quote-unquote good CPI report that has just come in today. Was nothing short of expected because there has been the headline inflation, which was super high, which was including food and energy, and then the core inflation came in lower than expected. But why are not the markets celebrating just yet? Specifically crypto, specifically gold, specifically the stocks. So I'm gonna get a little bit into a few headlines here. One of which is talking about the CPI inflation data that has come out today. And I'm gonna give you my instant reaction to a few other headlines that are gonna be surrounding that. And I'll also let you guys know how I am positioning myself for the next market moves. Right now, I am currently on the sidelines for crypto mainly, but I am looking to scale back in once I see the signals that I'll tell you guys about and I have been telling you guys about. And also why that is, of course. So let's take a look into the first piece of headline here. This is by Cointelegraph. It's titled, US CPI comes in lower than expected, but April rate cut still unlikely. So this is a big reason why we have not seen the markets really celebrate. It's because even though the CPI data came in meeting expectations, it still has not really moved the needle for the Federal Reserve for the next few upcoming Federal Reserve meetings, especially the one in June, which was the one that the new Fed chair was supposed to be taking office, and that had odds of a rate cut as high as 70% at one point. But since the Iran war that we're seeing right now, we are basically seeing even a rate hike on the table because of the oil prices that have been just going crazy. So this is why, unless we actually get that scenario under control, then the rate cut that was initially expected for June or even later in this year might not even come. And that is not very good for risk on assets like crypto, like stocks. So I am waiting for a swing in the odds that could be seen on the CME watch tool before scaling back into crypto. Let's take a look into some metrics here, because today's headline inflation, which is inclusive of energy and food, was actually meeting expectations at about 3.3%. Now the expectations were 3.3 to 3.4%, according to Google here. And so it met expectations, so it was not a surprise for the stock market or the gold market or crypto. So that's why we're not really seeing a dramatic reaction here from these markets. So let's also take a look into the core inflation, which is basically the metrics excluding food and energy, which is going to look a lot better because we have seen the oil prices rise significantly, but it hasn't really made its way to the other parts of the economy yet. And that could very likely happen if this continues. So the core inflation came in actually less than expected because it came in at 2.6%, which is not the worst. I think the expectations was 2.7%, so that actually came in lower than the expectations. So in that sense, the CPI report was not bad. It was, I mean, it's not a surprise. But let's take a look into a few other headlines here, because the next piece is going to be by Cointelegraph. It says Bitcoin traders set $88,000 target as a market bias tilts towards the bulls. Now, this is definitely a more bullish article here, and as much as I want to be bullish, I still have to wait for these signals of the what's going on in the world, the macro factors, and until that happens, until we probably resecure the Strait of Hormuz, which was the choke point for the Middle East oil, I think it's gonna. I don't think Bitcoin is gonna break out of the falling wedge I've been talking to you guys about on the 3-day time frame. So I'm waiting for that scenario to happen at the very least, if not wrapping up the war. The other worst case scenario would be, of course, if unemployment skyrockets, but that's the worst case scenario, and that would have the Fed to have no choice but to cut rates sooner than later. But what I'm seeing out of Bitcoin right now, which is the driver of this crypto market, it is hitting that upward trend line of that falling wedge pattern on the 3-day time frame. I've been talking to you guys about this, and I'll link you guys to my last video where I have pointed that out. And if you guys are new to trading or investing, make sure to continue watching this channel because you will get better at reading the charts and the macro indicators that could help you stack the odds in your favor. I was just in your shoes 7 years ago, and I plan to be here for many years more. And that's basically what I'm seeing. Bitcoin is hitting a resistance, a big resistance. So let's see if Bitcoin can actually break out of this resistance here at about 75 to 76,000. Now, I am saying the likely scenario is that Bitcoin does not break out on this swing, and I'll keep you guys updated as more data comes in. That is what I think is the likely scenario, but could I be wrong? Of course, because we're all just talking about probabilities here, and if I am wrong, then I would start scaling back into the markets with the expectations that it could still be on a little bit of a downtrend, breaking out of a falling wedge pattern, because that is not uncommon to see, because we have quite a bit of moving averages that are going to be acting as resistance above Bitcoin right now. And when Bitcoin pulls back, there's going to be a pretty good chance that it's going to pull back quite a bit of these altcoins as well. But I do think that this Bitcoin, if Bitcoin was to pull back, the downside could be quite limited because of the amount of higher time frame moving averages at about the $55,000 to $60,000 range, with quite a bit of bullish divergence scenarios on the daily time frame, even up to the weekly time frame. In fact, there's a double bottom on the weekly time frame. So that is, let's see if Bitcoin breaks out of that. And if I'm wrong, then I'll start scaling back into the markets, because it's also important. It's not just important to make, the likely scenario, to point out the likely scenario, but also important to think about what happens if I am wrong, because that is part of risk management. Because I don't want to figure it out, right then and there if something goes wrong. I want to plan ahead, and that's what I used to do, when I started trading. It's like I make, I point out likely scenarios, but if things don't go as expected, then I won't have a plan on what to do. But after years of trading, that is not the case. Alright, let's go ahead and go to the next piece of news here, which is by Coinpedia as well. It says, it's titled, Bitcoin breaks $73,000 as core CPI surprises. Will the rally last? So, yeah, Bitcoin needs to break above $75,000. Or even $76,000, just to be safe. With some solid candle closes, probably with a solid 3-day candle close, then that would tell me that the bulls are going to be gaining momentum. And if Bitcoin gets rejected at that top trend line here, which we are very close to, then that could pull quite a bit of these altcoins back. But do I think some of these altcoins could front run Bitcoin in this breakout? Yeah, I already see some altcoins that have broken out of their longer term downtrends that have started back in 2024. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some of these altcoins actually front run Bitcoin, because they have just been so beaten up. And if Bitcoin does get rejected though, then I would like to see how Bitcoin lands and how some of these altcoin setups will hold up. Alright, so let's go ahead and go to the next piece here. It says, gold rise rises on rate cut bets and US-Iran talks. Well, I'm really skeptical about this title here because the rate cut bets have not really moved much. Probably went from about 5% of a rate cut expectation in June to now 0%. That's not really significant, but I think it's really just waiting on what's happening with the Iran scenario. Alright, I think that basically wraps it up for today's headlines. Let me know if you have any questions, comments. Let's have a dialogue in the comment section. I will try to get back to your comments verbally. That's how I usually like to respond. And thank you very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. I also want to say that if you do find value in my content, do consider becoming a channel member of mine. As a channel member, you will get to request any altcoins, precious metals, markets updates in the format that I've been doing on my channel. And I will get back to your request within 2 days. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.